You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I am Parmeshwar Bawa. An action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. India and China have reached a new understanding on the management and control of the frontier during Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to New Delhi. This is what the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar delivered a strong message to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Dr. Jaishankar and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are to hold a meeting in Moscow later today. This as Russia expects to continue supplying oil to India despite warnings from the United States, Russian embassy officials in New Delhi have said, adding that Moscow hopes trilateral talks will soon take place with India and China. India has dismissed allegations by Bangladesh that Awami League-linked offices in Kolkata and New Delhi were involved in anti-Bangladesh activities. The Ministry of External Affairs called Dhaka's charge misplaced, stressing that no such activity is permitted from Indian soil. The Israeli military says it has begun the preliminary actions of a planned ground offensive to capture and occupy all of Gaza City and already has a hold on its outskirts. India has successfully test-fired its Agni-5 intermediate-range ballistic missile off the Odisha coast, marking a major advancement in the nation's strategic defense capabilities. Our big focus, India and China have agreed to explore demarcating their disputed border, a key move towards resolving decades-old territorial disputes as the neighbors look to recalibrate ties against the backdrop of strained India-US relations. Our two sides will set up an expert group to examine an interim arrangement for marking out border areas. This is what the Ministry of External Affairs has said in its statement. This decision came as Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi wrapped up a two-day visit in India, which was his first in 3 years. Meanwhile, a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry says that the expert group will explore advancing boundary delimitation negotiations in areas where conditions are ripe without specifying which ones. Shivarur has the finer details. Listen in.
The just concluded visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to India, where he met senior officials including National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and others, is said to be extremely successful. But the big takeaway right ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to China for the SCO summit, where he will be meeting with President Xi Jinping, is a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry where it has been mentioned that a new understanding has been arrived at on the border issue. Now, since the big military standoff began between India and China in May, June 2020, 5 years ago, relations have been rather turbulent. The two countries and the two militaries have attempted small tactical disengagements along the large standoff area in eastern Ladakh, but no de-escalation has actually taken place. Now, as NDTV broke first, de-escalation finally appears to be on the horizon, with the two countries creating an atmosphere for the first time where things might actually be looking up as far as the border issue is concerned. Now, there is reason to be cautiously optimistic because this is, after all, China, a country with which India has had one big war and one current extended standoff that has been on for 5 years. But the wording and the language of the statements that have come out, first from India and then from China, suggests that after 5 years of uncertainty and 5 years of a military atmosphere in eastern Ladakh, the two countries appear to be at least intending towards a new sort of dawn as far as the border question is concerned. This will include engagements. This will include a new mechanism. This will include identifying areas where frictions currently still exist and sorting them out with a spirit of actually solving some of these issues rather than aggravating them. Border management is going to be complicated. It's not going to change overnight, but the stage may be set, the decks may be cleared for a higher level engagement or possibly even a higher level takeaway when Prime Minister Modi is in China for the SCO summit.
Let's now turn our attention to our neighborhood. India has dismissed Nepal's objection to a decision by New Delhi and Beijing to resume border trade through Lipulekh Pass and said Kathmandu's claims on this territory are neither justified nor based on historical facts. Nepal, which triggered a border row in 2020 by issuing a political map that showed Kalapani, Limpiadhura and Lipulekh, all controlled by India as part of Nepalese territory, objected to the move by India and China on Wednesday. A statement from the Foreign Ministry in Kathmandu contended Nepal's official map incorporates Lipulekh as an integral part of the country. But our External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal dismissed this assertion and added, any unilateral artificial enlargement of territorial claims is untenable. Moving on, India has dismissed allegations by Bangladesh that Awami League-linked offices in Kolkata and New Delhi were involved in anti-Bangladesh activities. The Ministry of External Affairs called Dhaka's charge misplaced, stressing that no such activity is permitted from Indian soil. India has rejected Dhaka's accusations, saying it had no knowledge of such activities and would not allow them under any circumstances. Saurabh Gupta has been tracking all the details for you. Listen into his report.
After Bangladesh put out that statement that accused India of allowing anti-Bangladesh activities, mainly by allowing the Awami League, which is banned in Bangladesh, to operate from India, Bangladesh also alleged that the Awami League had set up offices in New Delhi and Kolkata, and that this was an affront to the people of Bangladesh, and that this could trigger anti-India sentiment, and also, this could lead to a further worsening of ties, and saying that, all of these things are something that India should look into and avoid. This statement that came from the Foreign Ministry of Bangladesh has now led to a very sharp, terse, and to-the-point response from India. One, that India does not allow its territory for activities against any country. Two, the statement from Bangladesh is misplaced. And three, and most importantly, Bangladesh should hold elections as soon as possible, and they should be free, fair, and inclusive. That is the point that India has been making, while there have been anti-India statements, open anti-India statements, including one from the chief advisor of the interim government, particularly targeting India's northeast. India has been circumspect, India has responded, but India has been circumspect, and India has been respectful of the close ties that India and Bangladesh had shared. But now, of course, that relationship has been strained, and India has responded with a very firm statement on what Bangladesh's foreign ministry said earlier in the day.
Moving on to other crucial news we're tracking. Russia expects to continue supplying oil to India despite warnings from the United States. This is what Russian embassy officials in New Delhi have said, further adding that Moscow hopes trilateral talks will soon take place with India and China. Russian First Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov had said separately that Russia saw scope for supplies of liquefied natural gas to India. In fact, we continue to ship fuel, include crude oil and oil products, is what he had said. Thermal and cooking coal is included, but we see potential for the export of Russian LNG. These are the words of Manturov. He was quoted as saying this by Interfax news agency. He also said, according to RAA news agency, that Russia was counting on expanding nuclear energy cooperation with India. Meanwhile, Dr. Jaishankar will hold bilateral talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. This as Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Pakistan for the 5th round of Pakistan-China strategic dialogue. Now, amid the United States imposing a 50% tariff on India, Dr. Jaishankar has pushed to increase trade with Russia, encouraging Russian companies to engage more intensively with their Indian counterparts. Noting India's rapidly growing economy and initiatives like Make in India that have opened up new windows for foreign businesses, Dr. Jaishankar also said that these dimensions represent an invitation for Russian companies to engage more. Mohammad Ghazali has been tracking the finer details and all the developments for us. He joins us live at the moment. Ghazali, take us through the External Affairs Minister's plan of action and also the meeting's agenda today.
See, the External Affairs Minister will be meeting his counterpart, Mr. Lavrov, today. Yesterday, he already had a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia over different aspects of business and trade sort of collaboration with Russia, and why it is significant. We know that how the geopolitical alliances or the global shift is happening. India is under tremendous pressure from all sides, but the best part of India's diplomacy if you consider the recent visit of Dr. Jaishankar to Russia, is that despite continued pressure from the United States of threats from tariff and all, India continues to maintain its relations with Russia. It's resetting its ties with China, and it's also pushing back against US tariff threats. So what we're going to see is that since Russia has also offered Indian companies and Indian exporters to come and invest in Russia, the same has been reciprocated by Dr. Jaishankar in his visit to Moscow today and yesterday. So we are going to see a lot of MOUs being signed between the two countries. This is also a kind of groundwork by Dr. Jaishankar to ensure that, that later this year, in a couple of months from now, Mr. Putin is also going to visit India for the India-Russia annual summit as well.
Ghazali, as always, thanks so much for joining us with the lowdown. Slipping into a quick break, back in a moment with the latest updates for you. Do stay tuned. Israel will call up around 60,000 reserve soldiers before a planned offensive to take Gaza City, but most forces that would operate in the Gaza Strip's largest urban center would be active duty soldiers. This is what the IDF has indicated. The call-up notices could be sent in the coming days, with reservists to report for duty in September. And it comes as Israel is studying Hamas's response to a proposal for a 60-day ceasefire, but currently they are planning to take Gaza City. They claim that they already have a hold as far as the outskirts is concerned. Separately, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has admitted to a UK-based podcast in an interview that Israel has work to do in winning over young people in the West, as polls show collapsing support. Listen in to what the IDF is saying, though.
כחלק מההיערכות לשלב הבא, הנחה הרמטכ"ל להוציא 60,000 צווי מילואים לתחילת ספטמבר. בנוסף לצווים אלו, נעריך עוד כ-20,000 צווים למשרתי המילואים בגדודים שמשרתים כבר היום.
Let's turn our attention to the other crucial story we're tracking. A disturbing wave of racist hate crimes against Indians has rocked Ireland, with several brutal, unprovoked attacks reported in recent months. Victims include a 6-year-old girl assaulted outside her home, professionals targeted by teenage gangs. The Indian Embassy has issued an advisory, a safety advisory, amid growing fear in the 90,000-strong Indian community. Many are blaming rising anti-immigrant sentiment fueled by Ireland's housing crisis. Protests and petitions have followed, demanding justice, accountability, as well as an end to racism. But for further clarity and for what's happening on ground zero, let's go across to Paul Murphy, who joins us from Dublin. Paul is a reporter with RTE. Thanks so much, Paul, for making time for us. What's behind this sudden spike in these attacks? Is there a larger pattern or trigger that authorities are looking into?
Well, there's been a broader increase in these hate crimes targeting immigrants. Up until sort of early July, a lot of the ones that would have come to attention, and most of them come to attention via social media, they would have involved attacks on asylum seekers, and also sometimes, attacks on immigrants who aren't asylum seekers. But then from July, we had a spate of these attacks. Now, on Garda Síochána, which is the Irish police force, they say that there hasn't been a significant jump in attacks focused on Indians who are resident here. But what is absolutely true is that there have been some quite high-profile attacks in terms of just abuse and also in terms of physical assault, including one very nasty one, which happened last month in Dublin, where a man was slashed and he was attacked and he was rounded on and he was racially abused. And there have been other incidents. Now, some of the incidents don't have an explicitly racial motive, but they have targeted Indians who are living here. So it's unclear in those cases whether they are, a regular run-of-the-mill assault, if you like, that could happen to anybody, or if they are explicitly racist. But certainly some of the attacks have been racist, and that's, it's very worrying for the government. It's very worrying for law and order, and also principally it's very worrying for Indians who live here, which make up a sizable section of the immigrant community in Ireland. The census in 2022 showed that Indians were the third largest group of non-Irish living in Ireland. So there are quite a few estimates would suggest maybe, around the 90,000 level at the moment of Indians who are either living and working here or studying here.
Paul, is there any political factor behind these attacks that have taken place in the recent months?
Just on the aspect of whether, the part of the reasoning behind the attacks is that immigrants are coming to take our jobs. I mean, that if that logic exists, and I don't believe that it does exist to any serious extent here, that argument, it's an argument that makes no sense. I mean, Ireland at the moment is close to full employment. That's one thing. Another thing is, as the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, recently pointed out, most of the attacks are done by teenagers. So these are kids who are not working. Typically, they're in school or they should be in school. And so they're not about to enter the jobs market. Also, the typical Indian working in Ireland is typically very, very well educated. The median income is higher than it is for Irish people and for other immigrant groups. So it's not as if the people who are attacking Indians would in any way be competing against them, because most of the Indians, for example, will either work in the sciences, healthcare is a very big one, and information technology. So these are not A, there's full employment anyway, B, the people who are doing the attacking aren't of working age, and C, it's highly unlikely that they would have the educational qualifications that the Indian immigrant working in these sectors would have. So that direct competition doesn't really come into it. I think where there is an issue is this politicization. We don't have a far-right group in Ireland at the moment of any political significance. In the recent elections, which were council elections, we don't have any far right somebody espousing anti-immigrant views in our parliament, in either our Senate or our lower house of parliament, which we call the Dáil, and we don't have in the councils, there's the guts of 700 councillors around Ireland. There was elections recently, and very few, much less than 10 of those would have who were elected would have these hard right anti-immigrant views. But what we do have is, I suppose, the spread of a sort of a political tendency, which is, a lot. In many ways, Ireland looks towards America more than the country would look towards Europe, and so that influence of where the highest echelons of American political power, as we all know, there's a lot of discussion about immigrants in a very negative way. That immigrants are often portrayed as being illegal immigrants, and then some of that spreads over to immigrants who aren't illegal, and they're being portrayed as illegal immigrants are being portrayed as people who are more likely to be involved in criminality. And there's a constant reiteration of this negativity. Now, in Ireland, as I say, that level of public political discourse in an anti-immigrant fashion hasn't taken hold yet. But what is quite possible is that discourse on social media has spread over. So young people who are maybe disenchanted, disenfranchised, or just looking for a bit of trouble find it easier to target people because they have somehow inhaled this nasty political rhetoric, which is driven in part by people who are extreme right in Ireland, but as a political grouping, they're very, very few, and they wouldn't really have much influence. Where it's problematic, these attacks are problematic, is they're problematic for the firstly, problematic for the country, because our society, our economy relies heavily on immigrant labour, and also, in particular, the health system relies very, very heavily on Indian nurses. So, for the last most recent figures that we have over a 12-month period, 52% of all newly registered nurses in Ireland had trained in India, and that compared to just over 20% of those who had actually trained in Ireland. So there's a huge reliance on Indian nurses in particular to keep our health system alive. It causes a problem for our Obviously, these attacks cause a deep problem. They cause a lot of unease within the Indian community, and they also cause a problem in terms of law and order, because, as I mentioned, a lot of the attacks are carried out by young people. And in Ireland, we have, under the Children's Act, the imprisonment of children, so anybody under 18, is something that is an absolute last resort. So normally, if a child breaks the law, they go through this junior liaison process, and so they don't end up with a custodial sentence. In fact, typically they don't end up with a criminal conviction at all. So it's a difficult, when the perpetrators are under 18, it makes it very difficult for the police and for the system of justice to deal with them. Now, they have recently introduced laws which, when hate or when racial hatred or ethnic hatred is an element of a crime, so when somebody's being assaulted and racial insults are being used, that they recently introduced legislation just from the start of this year. It's being implemented, where in some cases penalties are being doubled. So, for example, under the previous public order law, if you, for threatening or insulting or abusive behavior in a public place, you could be sentenced to a prison sentence of up to 3 months. That has been doubled now. So if there's a racial element, that can be doubled for up to 6 months. So there have been other laws on assault. Also, if there's a racial element to it, the sentencing and the imprisonment potential penalties have been increased substantially.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us. We'll, of course, revert to you for regular updates and stay in touch. Meanwhile, India has said it has successfully test-fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile that, when operational, should be capable of carrying a nuclear warhead to any part of China. The Agni 5 missile was successfully launched in Odisha, and authorities say it validated all operational and tech parameters. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's internet satellite business Starlink will roll out Aadhaar-based verification to onboard customers when it launches in India, the Ministry of Electronics and IT has confirmed. The company, as you know, has already secured approvals from India's space regulator to begin commercial operations and is expected to launch towards the end of 2025 or the start of 2026. US Vice President J.D. Vance and other Trump administration officials have suggested that the federal takeover of policing in DC could serve as a test case for other cities across the country as they try to amplify the issue. J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller visited Union Station to greet troops and tout the presence of federal law enforcement there, as the Trump administration continues to portray DC as one of the most violent cities on planet Earth, a depiction at odds with crime data.